Welcome to Breaking Points Beyond the Headlines. My name is James Lee. Over the years, you might have heard a little or a lot about the Church of Scientology. Its high-profile association with Hollywood A-listers like Tom Cruise and John Travolta have long lent the institution a veneer of glamour and legitimacy. However, the recent sexual assault conviction against Danny Masterson, an active member of the church, and a lawsuit filed by former member Leah Remini against the church have revealed cracks in their carefully curated image. Today, we dive into this mysterious and controversial organization.
"75 million years ago, the galaxy was ruled by a tyrant named Xenu. One day, Xenu rounded up various wrongdoers and imprisoned them in volcanoes on Earth, which was then called Tigiak.
This is the world according to church founder L. Ron Hubbard.
Hydrogen bombs were dropped on them. Then their spirits, called Thetans, were trapped in humans. And that is the cause of all our sufferings. Only through Scientology can our Thetans be cleared.
Wow, I think we're going to need some expert help to unpack all of that. So joining us today on Breaking Points is a former Scientologist and host of Growing Up in Scientology on YouTube, Aaron Smith Levin. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I just played for the audience a little clip of L. Ron Hubbard. He's talking about Xenu spirits and exorcising Thetans. Can you break down for us, in a simple term as possible, what is the core teachings and practices of Scientology?
I'll do my best. The core teachings and practices do actually change as someone goes up the levels in Scientology. There's levels that are non-confidential, and at the higher end, there's levels that are confidential. So the thing about Xenu and the body Thetans, most Scientologists don't actually know about that, believe it or not. So the most fair and charitable description that I can give you for what Scientologists believe, all Scientologists believe, even at the lowest level, is they believe that everyone here on earth is an immortal spiritual being. Their word for that is Thetan. People say it sounds like Satan with a lisp, but it's just Thetan. Scientologists don't believe in a heaven or a hell. They just believe that Thetans just continue to exist forever, that this body is just sort of a temporary vessel. When your body dies, you just pick up another body and live lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Now, there's another aspect to this, which is that they believe Earth is actually a prison planet, and that the Thetans who are sort of sentenced to live lifetime after lifetime here on Earth are here because they've kind of been banished here as a punishment, sort of, that this is quite literally a prison. And that normally a Thetan in native state that wasn't in this prison planet would have full and total recall of all their previous lives, because, you know, a Thetan just exists forever. And that the reason we only remember one lifetime at a time is that every time we die, we as Thetans are sort of pre-programmed as a part of our prison sentence to report into these stations called the Between Lives implant stations that wipe our memories from lifetime to lifetime, and that we're programmed to then shoot back down to Earth and pick up a new body and just live a new lifetime with complete amnesia of not only our previous lives, but our native godlike spiritual potential. Well, does that do a little bit of a service for now?
It sounds a lot like a blend between science fiction and religion, a little bit of that coming together.
That's right. Now you might go, okay, with that fundamental belief system, what is Scientology actually doing with that belief system? Well, Scientology has a one-on-one form of counseling therapy. They call it auditing. And Scientologists believe that with enough auditing, you can regain enough of your spiritual awareness and powers to to bypass these between lives implant stations, and to regain your ability to have total recall of your previous lives. And that the goal of Scientology is to get enough people into Scientology, and that once Scientologists succeed in getting enough, at least half of the population of Earth up through these levels and unplugging them from the matrix, basically, that we will, instead of reincarnating to Earth, we'll reincarnate to the next planet and get the cycle started on the next planet. They call it Target 2. Now, what's crazy is that like 90% of Scientologists in the world don't know anything about the Xenu story. They've never heard the word body thetan. They don't know anything about that part of it. They only know about your own reactive mind and trying to get rid of your own reactive mind. So I don't know that that's the 3-minute elevator pitch for Scientology.
I know this can also be a long answer too, but can you give the viewers a little bit of the skinny on your journey in and out of Scientology, when you joined, when it is, and why that you left, and a little bit about the in-between and also the post-Scientology experience?
Sure. So I was 4 years old when my mom got involved in Scientology. She was introduced by a friend of hers, which is how most people get into Scientology. Some friend introduces them. So I was 4. Some of my earliest memories in life is just being in the Scientology organization in downtown Philadelphia with, a whole bunch of other Scientology kids in the nursery there. I lived a relatively, my mom joined staff. So instead of being what Scientology would call a public Scientologist, that's someone who pays to do Scientology courses or who pays to receive Scientology auditing, which, by the way, auditing costs between $200 to $500 per hour. It's not cheap. So she joined staff. That means you work for Scientology. It's like your day job. And the Scientology courses and auditing that you get, you don't have to pay for them. So that's why a lot of people join staff. So as a kid, I lived a relatively normal life until about 12 years old. I went to public school and everything like that. When I was 12, my mom took me and my brother, my stepbrother, my stepsister, 2 of her friends' kids, pulled us all out of school, and we all started working full-time for Scientology in Philadelphia. And then we moved down to Clearwater, Florida to do Scientology training down there. So, from the age of 12 to 26, I worked full-time for Scientology. I did not go to high school. I did not finish middle school. I do not have a diploma or an equivalency degree or anything like that. I ended up joining what Scientology calls the C organization. That's like their most dedicated core of staff members. If you're in the Sea Org, it's not just your day job. It's your entire existence. It's 24/7, 365. It's all you do. You don't own property. You don't own a home. You can only have a relationship with other Sea Org members. You cannot have children in the Sea Org. Such is their dedication to the cause. So after a certain amount of years, I met my wife and got married in the Sea organization. After a certain number of years, we were just a little fed up with kind of how unfulfilling and abusive the experience of working in the Sea Org was. So we got pregnant, knowing well that we would have to leave the Sea organization. So we left the Sea Org because we were having a baby, but we were still public Scientologists for a while. That started to change in 2009 when the Tampa Bay Times, back then it was the St. Pete Times, published a series of interviews with very high-ranking former Sea Org executives, people who had been famous personalities in Scientology. These people had not only left the Sea organization, but had left Scientology altogether and were speaking out for the first time. So these former executives who were starting to speak out were telling the most horrific stories of abuse, of imprisonment, of quite literal torture, not quite Guantanamo level, but close. And for me, that was like the first major crack in the dam of going, a lot of things I have believed were true my entire life are clearly not true. I don't know exactly where everything stands, but something's not right. For about the next 3 or 4 years, I was on a pretty gradual path of discovery of what exactly the lies were. And it quickly became clear to me that it was pretty much all lies. And part of the tail end of that path for me had to do with, I mentioned earlier that there's non-confidential levels and there's confidential levels. Well, there's levels even above the confidential levels. They're so secret, they're so confidential, they've never been released yet. They're still in the vault. It's like the magic, right? And it's sort of the carrot that gets dangled in front of the faces of Scientologists is, guys, we need to work a little bit harder. We need to donate a little bit more money because L. Ron Hubbard said these unreleased levels can't be released until Scientology reaches certain expansion benchmarks. So we just need to try a little bit harder. Well, once I found out from people who I knew would actually know that there ain't no such thing as these upper confidential levels. L. Ron Hubbard did not leave behind anything. They looked everywhere. They looked through all of his papers and his files and his records and his cabinets, and there ain't nothing. I was like, someone should have told me that 25 years ago. I'm ready to get on with my life.
Before I do want to get into the controversy a little bit that you're alluding to, this control type of thing, but I did want to ask you, what do things people just in the real world, what do we get wrong about Scientology? Because I'm certain there has to be some positive aspects to Scientology, or else no one would join.
Let me answer two different ways. I think one thing that people would get wrong about Scientology is just not truly understanding that most Scientologists have never heard most Scientologists do not know anything about the Xenu story or the body Thetan story. Scientologists know everything that I explained early on about the Between Lives implant stations and the prison planet and, the Galactic Federation and all sorts of stuff. They've just never heard the Xenu story. So if you've seen South Park, you know more about Scientology than most Scientologists do. And to answer the question the other way, at the lowest introductory levels, Scientology is actually very practical, sort of helpful in like a self-helpy, personal coach, guru, motivation, Tony Robbins-ish, Grant Cardone, who just happens to be a Scientologist. You can fix all your problems. Just hustle a little harder. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. People who end up joining Scientology, they don't think they're joining a cult. And at the very lowest levels, Scientology doesn't feel like a cult. It feels self-empowering. It's giving you a positive message. You can overcome any obstacle. You can solve any problem. You are all powerful natively. All you need is the right tools. And for $9.99, and we can give you those tools. So, but honestly, I wonder, well, I mean, the question was, what do most people get wrong about Scientology? I wonder how many people actually understand that.
What, on the flip side of that, so if there's all these good things about Scientology, it's practical, it gives you these kind of self-help tools. What's the worst part? Why do people, like, why are you said you were driven to leave because of certain things that you saw? Is it the secrecy? Is it the control they exert over people's lives seemingly? Is it the leadership? Is it David Miscavige, corruption? What's your opinion on where does Scientology go wrong?
In my personal opinion, the easiest answer to the question is where it just overtly goes out of its way to destroy families, the family unit. Because Scientology has this belief, like we're all just basically 60-some trillion-year-old beings. They have this belief, like if you have a child, that's not really your child. It's just your body gave birth to that body. But you're a Thetan, and that body's animated by a Thetan. And Thetans don't give birth to Thetans. Thetans are just all natively godlike entities. So this belief completely minimizes the value of familial relationships. And Scientology will demand that people sever all ties with anyone in their life who is negative about Scientology. And it doesn't matter if that's your mom, dad, spouse, brother, sister, son, or daughter. To me, that is where Scientology gets really, really bad. Now, there's financial aspects as well. So because Scientology holds that, this entire existence is really just the matrix anyway, and, higher education is pointless. Retirement accounts are pointless. Savings accounts are pointless. The only thing that could possibly have any value in this lifetime is helping Scientology expand and get more people into Scientology and up Scientology's bridge to total freedom. That whole construct leads to just financial decimation of Scientologists. Now, when I mentioned before that the experience working in the Sea Org just got to the point where it was not fulfilling and it was abusive, L. Ron Hubbard created this management system where he says there is no natural explainable reason why stats would ever go down. In order for stats to go down, somebody has to actively be forcing them down and sabotaging the organization to make them go down. Well, unfortunately for Scientology staff members, Scientology is shrinking, not growing. So there's this constant witch hunt happening internally in the organization to find out who is it that's sabotaging the organization. Now, the problem is you can never point the finger up. You can only ever point the finger down. So it's the lower level staff members that are constantly just being harassed and interrogated and punished for the fact that more new people aren't coming into Scientology. when the reality is the people at the lower levels of the organization have absolutely no control over the reason why Scientology is shrinking. They have absolutely no control over it. And so the experience of working for Scientology, everyone is just always pointing fingers at each other and witch hunts all the time. And it's just exhausting.
Yeah, I want to pivot to talking a little bit about the work that I think this ties in, the work that you do today. So you live stream almost every day. I think every day or almost every day. You have conversations with other people about Scientology. So I'm wondering, what is your goal? Is it to get people out of Scientology? Is it bringing attention? Is it pressuring the government or the IRS to remove its tax-exempt status? What's your motivation?
It's definitely all of those things. Sometimes on my channel, I will say, fundamentally, I'm simply motivated by pure revenge. And if I can do as much good in the process, but success is the best revenge. And so I define success as making sure that former Scientologists who have their own stories that highlight how abusive and destructive Scientology's policies and practices are, that all of those voices can get as big of a reach, as far as a reach, and be heard as loudly as possible. And I almost relish the fact that we're all doing it with just phones and computers and no budget, whereas Scientology spends hundreds of millions of dollars on the most expensive professional, AV operation possible. And yet the voices of former Scientologists who are telling the actual truth about Scientology are being heard louder with no budget than everything Scientology can muster.
You mentioned earlier that Scientology is on the decline. So what I'm wondering is, what do you think is the outlook for Scientology over the next few years to a decade? Is this something that we need to actively pay attention to, or is it going to die out on its own? Just let things play out. Where do you see things going?
Yeah, interestingly enough, a little bit of the both of what you just said there. It is dying out on its own. I do think it still deserves to have attention paid to it, and it deserves to have its the speed of its demise accelerated. I certainly enjoy contributing to the acceleration of that demise. Now, practically speaking, I don't think Scientology ever ceases to exist unless you succeed in getting its tax exemption taken away. It already has its tax exemption taken away once before. The IRS determined that L. Ron Hubbard was personally enriching himself from Scientology, and it stripped Scientology of its tax exemption. In 1993, it won that tax exemption back after a years-long process of harassing thousands of IRS agents personally. Scientology is probably the only organization in history that succeeded in bringing the IRS to its knees. It is my hope that sort of what we're doing here with SPTV and a whole bunch of other activists who are doing similar things, who've never had anything to do with Scientology, that we will eventually succeed in getting enough grassroots support for revoking Scientology's tax-exempt status, that members of Congress will take it up as a popular cause. And that eventually, I hope within the next 10 years, we will succeed in getting Scientology's tax-exempt status revoked. Even if Scientology keeps its tax-exempt status, its membership will continue to decline. But the problem with having this tax exemption is because it has a special type of religious tax exemption that protects it in the courts. Like if you sue Scientology and you try to get the judge to look at a particular policy letter in Scientology, the judge will go, whoa, 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 that's religious scripture. I'm not even allowed to give an opinion on whether that's abusive or not. And also because they're tax exempt, their operating expenses are as close to zero as you can get. They do not pay property tax, and they do not have they do not have a payroll. All of their staff members are considered volunteers. They don't have to pay any of them. And even the ones they do have make like, $50 a week or less. So Scientology probably makes a more interest on its cash reserves than it costs to keep all the organizations in the world open. Electric and water is the only expenses Scientology has. So they will continue to exist as an entity as long as they have tax exemption. And that's why I think getting that tax exemption revoked is a worthy cause, even if their membership will continue to dwindle on its own. There's less than 30,000 members in the entire world. I mean, it's probably closer to 20,000 at this point.
All right, I think there's actually probably a lot more than we have time for today. So Aaron, I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find you, find more of what you do, what you're talking about, whether it's on YouTube or other platforms.
growing up in Scientology on YouTube is where I focus all of my efforts. I've got socials and stuff, but growing up in Scientology on YouTube is my central thing. Everyone can just find me there.
All right, awesome. We'll link down below, and everybody go follow Aaron. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
If you'd like to learn more about the growing grassroots protest movement against Scientology, I recently joined some of the protesters on Hollywood Boulevard to do some on-the-ground and behind-the-scenes reporting. The video is live over on my YouTube channel, 5149 with James Lee. Head on over, check that out. Give me a follow. The link will be in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching Breaking Points, and I appreciate your time today.